Catus Maximus here. Surprisingly enough, this is the very first video I've ever done about a Vlchek hand tool. It's not Vlchek, it's somebody who did named Frank Vlchek, who immigrated from Czechoslovakia back in the late 1800s. And so Vlchek Tools, and I hope I'm pronouncing that at least remotely correctly, is a true old line hand tool manufacturer. I mean, they had, by 1910, were a well-established manufacturer and pretty well respected. The long and the short of it is they ended up going out of business in the 1960s. They really focused on just wrenches and more plain Jane things like pliers and hammers and those types of hand tools, and didn't really jump on the interchangeable socket and creating a wider variety of mechanics and industrial maintenance tools like the Snap-ons, Blackhawks, New Britons, and so many other well-respected and well-known American hand tool manufacturers. Vlchek tools were great quality, great alloy steels, close attention paid to heat treatment, but they were just a little bit too niche, had a little bit too narrow of a catalog, and they ended up being one of the old line tool manufacturers that, they went out of business more than 50 years ago. So it's unfortunate. Most of what I've ever seen from Vlchek, I mean, they did eventually come out with interchangeable socket sets and that type of stuff, but it was like too little, too late type of situation. So and since they've been out of business for more than half a century, every Vlchek tool that you ever run into is going to have been made in the 1960s or earlier. There is a surprising amount of history because Frank Vlchek actually he wrote his own autobiography. So and it is available in English. And you get just quite a bit of information about what it was like to, found and start a hand tool company. It is a traditional story. I mean, an immigrant into America in the 1800s and just worked until he was able to buy his first power hammer and, drill press and basic manufacturing equipment, and just started making hand tools, kind of selling them, quote unquote, out of the trunk of his car and then just started building up the business from there and turning it into a real corporation. So it's always nice, to run into them. I just never felt like making a video about just like a Vlchek open-ended wrench, which is the most common item and one of the only items I've seen. Anyway, enough history. This has made in USA on it 3 times here. And then since slip joint pliers are just the handles are the same, it's just whether they poke a figure 8 or a hole in one of the handles, which makes it a left and a right. So we have made in USA also forged there, but it is the triple made in USA pliers. Other than that, these haven't had a lot of use, so I would expect the rivet to be tight, and of course it is. Bog standard jaws, just a copy of the Diamond Tools, which I think is like the most well-known and respected. Diamond Tools was who at least popularized slip joint pliers. I don't know if they actually invented them, but kind of like Crescent, they're the ones who really popularized them. Slip joint pliers are one of the top 5 most manufactured tools in the history of hand tools. Man, I've got like 50 pairs of these things. And 6 inches bog standard, even though I have some that are up to 10 inches. So, other than that, they're just regular old, not much in the way of plating. I don't know if these are cadmium plated. They very well may be. I guess I never paid attention to that, although it is something to consider with old tools, is the fact that there is cadmium before chrome plating, just because chrome plating was a lot more expensive until later years. Other than that, I kind of like they're squared off. So many of these pliers, they really tumble them and everything's like just really kind of rounded over, which is fine. That's the standard. But I kind of like a classic tool like this where it's just a little bit harder edges. These feel super solid. I mean, when I take and squeeze these with both hands, absolutely no springiness in the handles at all. We have a kind of burlap weave type texturing on the handle. It's actually not as good as many other pliers texturing, but nonetheless, I do like a good classic textured handle because it's just easier to grip than like modern plasti dipped tools, which I guess I don't really understand why that even became a thing when textured handles, especially on something like pliers where you're pulling on stuff, twisting. That's exactly what you want. So anyway, here's a look at some Vlchek slip joint pliers. I think they came out with their first set of these in like 1905 or something like that. I do not believe these are 1905 pliers by far. I think these are probably 1940s, 50s, or 60s. They'd have to be. Couldn't be any later than that. But just wanted to dedicate a few minutes to Vlchek tools and how it's pretty uncommon to run into anything besides open-end wrenches from this manufacturer. And it's after all these years, the very first video I've ever made about Vlchek. Really appreciate you all watching. See you next time.